have a presentation organized by the School of Information Studies Information Organization Research Group. And the speaker is Ms. Jennifer Owen. She's currently the Assistant Dean for Information Management Services at the River Campus Libraries of the University of Rochester. I hope I get it right. And Jennifer is also one of the co-executive directors for the eXtensible catalog organization. They use a short name, XC organization, I think. XCO, okay, that's even shorter. And her responsibilities include advising the XC team on metadata issues, developing the XC metadata application profile, planning and participating in the governance model for the XC community, and serving as a contact for XC partners and potential partners. I'm going to let Jennifer explain what that is. Okay. Jennifer holds master's degrees in library science and historical musicology from the University of Michigan, our neighboring state. She has spent her career as a librarian working in the areas of cataloging and metadata, initially as a specialist in music cataloging. In recent years, she has focused her research on metadata standards development, RDA, the further data model, and the use of legacy library metadata in next generation discovery systems. And so she is really at the forefront of all the new developments in cataloging and the metadata. I think the last part is also very interesting. When she is not working on XC, she has a totally different life. She can often be found driving her kids to music dance lessons, like me. I can be found doing that too. Refinishing old furniture that I didn't know, and working in her garden. Okay, let's together welcome Jennifer Owen.
I forgot that last bit was on the website, personal stuff, but I'm glad to know it's still accurate. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm really delighted to have been invited. I'm going to talk to you about this project that I've been working on for the last 3 years called the eXtensible Catalog. And I thought I'd start off by just talking a little bit about how I got into this. Because I think it's kind of, well, a lot of you are students, so if somebody had told me when I was in library school that I'd be co-heading up a software development project, I would have thought they were crazy because I couldn't code software to save my life. So I started out as a music cataloger and sort of became a cataloging administrator. And at one point in that process of being a catalog administrator, one of my bosses, who was the associate dean at the time, said, you know, you really ought to talk to this new computer scientist guy that we just hired. See if you can come up with a project to do together. So we sat down together, and for a while we could hardly even find a way to talk to each other because we were talking different languages, it seemed. But then we finally came up with a grant proposal, and we put it forward. We got a grant, and then we got another one, and then we got another one, and we just sort of, this is sort of how this whole thing came about. So, here I am co-heading a software development project. So what I'm going to talk about today is why we decided to develop this at the University of Rochester, a little overview of what XC is. I'm going to talk a little bit about user research because it's important. This is something that my institution seems to be really known for. And it was important for why we got into doing what we're doing. And then my other thing is metadata, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the metadata aspects of the system. And then just a little bit about where we think the system might be going in the future with linked data. So let's start with why did we get into this project of developing the eXtensible Catalog? Well, I don't know if you're familiar with anything that we've done at the University of Rochester, but about in 2007 we published this book, Studying Students, the undergraduate research project at the University of Rochester, which was co-edited by a couple of my colleagues, Nancy Freed Foster and Susan Gibbons. And this is the result of a very intensive project that was meant to, that was done at the university to look at how students were doing their work and really to figure out whether we were giving students what they needed. So we started from a place where thinking that we kind of know what our students need, right? We've been in libraries a long time. We know what they need. But moving from that to trying to ask the question, well, what do they need? Maybe we don't know for sure what they need. Maybe we should ask that question. And then realizing that that's really not even the right question to ask. The real question, or a more useful question, is really, what do our students need to do? So what are the tasks that they need to do? What are they trying to accomplish in their work? And how can we address those particular issues? So the original user research really looked at learning what the students need to do. It involved a lot of activities like actually going to the dorm to visit the students in their dorm rooms in the middle of the night to see how they were writing their papers. There were design workshops that students did, looking at space in the library, looking at technology. We asked students to map out their day so that they were given an actual map of the university, and then they said, well, I start up here in my dorm room, and then I go over here, and then I come back here for lunch, and then I have to run over here to get this, and then I go. So they actually see what they were trying to do on campus. They took pictures of what they did throughout the day. They were interviewed. So it was really kind of all-encompassing effort to try to figure out what the students were trying to do. So there was a lot of good work that came out of that and that went into that book. The problem is that we did all this user research, but if we don't have a way to put that user research to work, if we don't have control over the discovery environment that we're showing to our students, it's kind of a waste. It's like, well, we know what they want, and we can't give it to them. Isn't that too bad? Well, that was not a good position to be in. So this is where we decided here's what we wanted to do about it. We decided we were going to develop our own software, which we call eXtensible Catalog. We built it using a modular architecture that I'll show you. There are different toolkits that go with it. We really focused on making the system configurable so that libraries have as much control as possible over what they're showing their users. We wanted to use established standards and protocols. We wanted other people to be able to use what we've done, and we're giving it away. It's open source. So this is sort of our approach to how we were going to solve this problem. So just going to go a little bit to the overview. I'm going to go through some of this quickly because I do have a lot I want to show you. Hoping to do a live demo of part of the system for you. So what is XC? It's open source system. It's open source software. It's free, user-centered, and next generation software for libraries. There are there are actually 3 parts, but there's 2 parts really that there's a discovery interface, so a way for users to look for library resources. And there's also a set of tools behind that are rather extensive, and that really make the discovery interface work the way we want it to work. So as we've been going along, I don't know if you can read this slide, but these are all of the partners and contributors we've had to the project. Our major funding was from the University of Rochester and also the Mellon Foundation, the Carly Consortium in Illinois, and you can see all the other institutions that helped us as well. And we do have a little bit of a worldwide footprint. Most of our little pushpins are in the Northeast U.S., but we also have one of our primary developers works out of Hungary. Another one is working in Ghana. And one of our early implementers will be Kyushu University in Japan. So we're kind of, we want to put more of those pins in different places, but we're kind of proud of that. So a little overview of the software. What does it do? Well, there's 3 parts. There's the user interface. It has facet browsing. It's built on top of the Ferber data model, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Very customizable. There are metadata tools that work behind the scenes, and I will show you that as well. And these tools are really designed to automate processing of big batches of metadata. So it's not a metadata editor where you go in and clean up a record. This is trying to be very efficient in terms of taking a great big batch of data and reusing it in another system. And then we have some connectivity tools that allow this system to talk to your integrated library system. So you have all your data in your ILS, we need to get that data out, a copy of that data out, and we need to get the circulation status back. So we need to be able to talk to that system. So if you remember these 3 categories, user interface, metadata tools, and connectivity tools, the next 2 slides have those same categories on them. So we have the user interface at the top, metadata tools in the middle, and the connectivity tools at the bottom. I'm going to kind of build a picture now of the architecture of the system. So anything in this picture that's gray is something that a library already has. If it's blue, it's something that we're building, and you'll see that the blue stuff fits in between the gray stuff. So down here at the bottom, we have an integrated library system, and a library may have another digital repository, an institutional repository, some other repository. So these are your sources of the metadata that you already have, your catalog records. We built 2 toolkits to lock directly to that ILS, and I'll come back to the ENSID toolkit in a minute. But the OAI toolkit takes the data, the marked data in your ILS, and makes it what we call OAI harvestable. It makes it able to be harvested using a standard protocol. So it makes it possible to get the data out of your system in a way that's predictable and that we can allow another system to synchronize with it. So we're pulling the data out of our integrated library system. We pull the MARC data, we transform it to MARC XML, and we also can pull harvest metadata from other repositories. And here, this is a repository that we use double core here that you can see over on the right. So then we have this middle layer called the Metadata Services Toolkit. This is a very extensive platform that does this bulk cleanup of the metadata. And I'll talk quite a bit more about that and what kinds of things that can do. And then finally, we need to pull that data into a user interface. So we've developed a toolkit called the Drupal toolkit, which works on top of a content management system called Drupal. And a lot of libraries already have their websites built on top of Drupal. So our toolkit works inside, so that there we have the blue box inside the gray box. And then the final bit is that we have this user interface. We need to sync it back to the ILS. We need to be able to get the circulation status and circulation information so that a user can interact with our front end and know whether the book's checked out, they can place a recall or a hold or whatever. So we have this dotted line going back and forth with authentication. So that's the system. That's how it works. It seems a little complicated, but I'm going to show you later on. I'm going to show you the Drupal interface, the front end, and I'm going to show you some screenshots of the middle part here as well. So we have these 3 parts. These are the 2 that I think I'm really going to talk about today, because the user interface and the metadata tools go together. And they go together because what we want is more control over the user interface. And what we need to do is if we have more control over the metadata, we have more options for customizing the user interface. So this is sort of one of the takeaways, I guess, from the talk, is that you can't, you can try to muck around with manipulate the front end of your system, but if you can't control the metadata that's behind it, it's not going to be a very powerful system. So that's why we spend a lot of time working on the back end. So when I talk about customization of the user interface, I'm really talking about a library looking at what their users need and making the front end look like what they want their users to be able to do it. So these are all things that can be customized. The theme is the look and feel, the color, the logos, the indexes, the way the indexes are structured, the way the facets are put together and defined on the side, which I'll show you in a couple minutes, the way the results lists are defined, the record displays. And then we have something special called browse interfaces, and I'll show you that really allows a library to customize an interface just for a particular clientele or a particular part of their collection. So all of this is stuff that can be customized. So we knew we wanted to customize. I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about, started with the user research with the undergraduates. We knew we wanted to do user research along with developing the software for XC, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the process we used for that. So we had partners in this. This was our Big Melon grant. We worked with teams of librarians at Cornell, Ohio State, and Yale, as well as at the U of R. And each one of those teams participated in the user research that was done to try to really figure out what are our users trying to do. So since we had studied undergraduates before, really people who had very little experience using library systems, for XC we wanted to focus on users that were a bit more experienced. So faculty, graduate students, upper level students who had had some experience, they were really doing some more serious research. So the user research for that concentrated on asking questions such as this. And this is just one example, but to ask the researcher, what resources had they used recently? and in their research. And how did they find out about them? How did they obtain them? And how do they use them? How do they organize their stuff? Is it just piles on their desk? Do they have digital ways of organizing their information? So we're really trying to get at how they do their work. And then also a more general question, just, how do they keep current in their field? How do they get new information? This is really just trying to find out how they work. So it's a broader question from, just how do you interact with the library system? How do you do your work? So I'm going to talk a little bit now about what we learned. And the challenge with this user research is that, we're looking at how users do their work and how they do their research, and we want to somehow relate that back to how we build the software. So we had to look through the findings that we found with the user research to see, well, how can we build software around what they're doing? And we knew what we wanted to build was sort of a front-end new discovery system for library metadata. So what I'm going to do is show you now some of the things that we found, and then talk a little bit about how we addressed them, and then I'm going to show you in the live demo of exactly what that looks like. So we found, first of all, that users want to be able to choose between versions of a resource, or to see the relationships between resources. So that could be the same journal article that's in print and online. It could be one thing that's based on another work. They want to be able to see those relationships, and that's something that's really lacking sometimes in our ILSs right now. So our approach to that was really, this is where we did some really extensive work. We took the underlying metadata and we really kind of re-engineered it so that it conforms to the Ferber functional requirements for bibliographic records data model. I hope some of you are familiar with that. So what that meant was breaking it down from one record into separate records for works, expressions, and manifestations. And I'll show you more about that in a minute. We're actually using some RDA elements within this structure. And we developed ways to group resources that are affiliated or that represent the same Ferber work or expression, so that we're setting the stage for being able to show those relationships to the users. We're not quite there yet, but we're kind of setting the stage for that, and you'll see how that works in a few minutes. More findings. Researchers value scholarly networks. Well, we kind of knew that, but we really found out this is very important in a discipline. And as you all as students probably, you want to know who are the leading scholars in the field that you are studying. Who are the writers that you should be reading? You want to know, you value the relationship with your advisor or your mentor. Those relationships become even more important, of course, as you get to the doctoral level and you have your thesis advisor. And people want to know who's studied with whom. So our approach with that, this was a little trickier because here we've kind of run up against some of the limits of our current metadata standards. But one thing that we really zeroed in on is this, the relationship between a thesis advisor and the doctoral candidate, and to try to find a way that we could really display that. And there is a way in the MARC format to display that information, but most ILSs treat it like an author, and that's kind of fraught with problems if you have a catalog record for someone's dissertation and the thesis advisor looks like a co-author. That's not good. So, so we kind of ran up against a limit there, but we found some ways around that, to put it in the schema. It's a little bit of a workaround, but it was very important, interesting that we found that this is so important. Users have preferred material format types. This is something I'll show you in the user interface. We're not surprised to find that a lot of users only want to see what's online right now because they're writing a paper and they got to get it done. So don't show me anything, I can't get it right now. So we sort of knew that was going to be true. A lot of people, unfortunately, I guess, don't want to see microforms. Just don't show me anything in microfilm. I don't want to deal with it. So we did find a way, and I'll show you how we work that into the user interface. Whether the library wants that or not is up to them. And users want to know when they do a search and they get a list of results, they want to know why they pulled up a particular record in that search result. And why did I get that? So we have devised a way to show the keywords in context from the search. And I will show you that as well. So these are some examples of things that we really tried to do in the user interface that directly address the things we found in the user research. So I started showing you a picture of one book. I'm going to show you our new book. This is coming out in May. Scholarly Practice, Participatory Design in the eXtensible Catalog. It's been edited by some of my colleagues. And the chapters in this book have all been written by people from the different institutions that participated in the eXtensible Catalog user research. So this is coming out as an ACRL publication, so you can take a look at it if you want to find out more about how that user research worked and what the findings were. So now I'm going to actually skip to talk about how we actually took those research findings and made them work in our software. So to start, you've seen this picture before. This is the architecture picture. I'm going to start at the top and talk about the user interface, which is what our users would see, and which is where a lot of the work that we did with the user research, this is where it's showing up to users. So again, I've talked about a little bit of this. It's built on top of Drupal. We were envisioning a single search interface that would work across different types of resources. You can see there's some of the other features of that interface, and I'll show you some of that. But the main thing here is that we wanted to be extensively customizable, and I'll show you how we're enabling that customization. So now I'm going to attempt the live demo. And if it doesn't work, I can go back to my slides, but we will hope for the best. Okay. So this is the user interface for the eXtensible Catalog. If you, it's a little hard to see, I'm afraid, some of the words along the side. So you can see along the side we have facets. So the first one is subject here, then the next one is creators and authors. Now we haven't put in a search term yet, so it's just telling you how many of each thing are in the database as a whole. And what we're searching here is a copy of all of the University of Rochester data from our Voyager database. So we have pulled a copy of all the data from our ILS, and that's what's populating the system. You can see we have one simple search box at the top. There are some tabs here, and I will get to those tabs later. And you can see here there are more facets along the side. You can see that some of the facets start open, and some of them start closed up. So we could open up language, or we could close up language. This is all customizable. Everything that you see here, a library can determine what is here. Which facets show up, what the name of the facet is, whether it's open or closed, what order it is, all of that's customizable. Now as I go along, you see this, this black bar along the top. A user would not see that. I'm logged in as an administrator, so I'm going to go into some of these menus up here and show you how we actually allow the customization as we go along. So I'm going to start. So I'm just doing a a search on the word supercapitalism, and I get back some hits. And you can see that we are pulling images from Synthetic Solutions, or cover images over on the right-hand side. So this all sort of looks pretty typical of what you expect in a user interface. You can see here that we're giving you the availability, whether or not the book is on the shelf. You can see right here, this one says available. Over on the right-hand side here, we are showing you why you pulled back that particular book. Where does the word supercapitalism appear in the metadata, and why did I get that particular book? So that's what this whole column is here. Now this is totally customizable. Again, the library, it doesn't want to show that column, they can get rid of that. One other thing I wanted to point out, remember what I was saying about the users want specific formats. They want online only, they don't want microforms. We've enabled that up here in the top, so the user can just click right up here and just say, I only want online stuff, or they can unclick that and can exclude microforms. Again, this is something that not every library would want. And that can be turned off. But we wanted to do it because it's an exact implementation of what users told us. So there you have it. Let's see. I'm going to go to a full record. So if I click here, I'll go to a full record. And again, the full record display, everything's customizable here. And you see, we have the location here, we have the availability. If we scroll down, there's more of it. Again, what to display the user is all customizable by the library. At the bottom here, we have some related resources. Now, right now we're doing this as sort of a kind of a kludgy way to do. We're doing it. If you've heard of Solar, that's the software we're using as the basis for our software, and it has an algorithm that pulls in related resources. We really want to do this using the Ferber relationships, and we're not quite there, but we will be able to do that before too long. Now, I want to show you what's behind this, because if you're looking at an ILS, you're looking at your OPAC. There's a MARC record behind that. Well, there's not a MARC record back here. We have something here called, see this button, it says View XE Schema. We've taken the MARC data and we have parsed it into the different Ferber levels. So now we're looking at the XE Schema record, which a user would never do. We can see this because I'm logged in and because I want to show you what's behind the scenes. So you see here that we have a work record, and then an expression record, and a manifestation record. So we have separate records that are behind this. Each record is linked to the one that it's related to. So we have the expression record knows that it belongs with this work record, and we have an ID right here that links up to the one above it. So all of these records are pointing to each other, and I'll show you in a minute a little bit more about how that works. But this was a really huge feat that we were able to accomplish with this. And what's important about it is that this is the structure of data that RDA is really intended to do. I hope some of you are familiar with RDA. The current implementation of RDA that is in the works is really to put RDA into MARC records. And that's really not the ultimate intent of RDA. The real intent is to have separate records for works, expressions, manifestations, and items. We haven't gotten to items yet, but we have implemented that kind of structure behind the scenes within our XE. So I'm going to go back to the home screen. Let me see. Okay. Everything here is customizable. Let me show you a little bit about how that works. So I'm going to, where am I going? Indexing, manage facets, and to list facets. Okay, so this again, this is all the behind the scenes stuff, but this is the way a library will set this up. So we have all the facets here. Let's say we have a creators and authors facet. Let's say we want to do something different with that. We can just edit it. If we don't want to call it creators, authors, we can call it something else. We can change the way that's enabled. We can also change what metadata elements are included in it. So we just click right here to decide what's on here. And now you can see here, these are actually RDA roles. So here's a way, some of the metadata behind the scenes is RDA. So you can see some of it here. Okay, I'm going to cancel so I don't really do anything to that. Okay, let's go back to I'm going to show you one other thing. These tabs along the top. These are what we call browse pages. This is a way that a library can create a page, a new web page interface, without doing any programming at all. So what this page has done is that it has behind it sort of a canned search that just goes to our DVDs and videos. And this actually duplicates a page that we actually have on our website at the U of R. We have a big collection of DVDs and videos that circulates, sort of our own little blockbuster. And we wanted a page for that. We had a programmer come in and do all kinds of custom programming to create that a few years ago, and we were able to duplicate all that work with just a few clicks to create this page here. So we have browse by title. So if I go to R, you'll see all the DVDs and videos. Let's start with the letter R. If I can go to language, I can go to a list of directors, and I can browse by director. So I can go down to, where's Woody Allen? I'm not going to find it this way. This is where you find out whether you have good authority control or not, because we have a little problem here with Robert Altman. There's 2 of them. But yeah, if there's ever a need for authority control, you find it when you do drop-down lists and faceted browsing. But anyway, you can see that we have all the directors there. Let me show you how we created this page. Browse interface builder list. Okay, so these are the ones we created. If I wanted to edit this, I'm going to just click on view instead of edit because I don't want to change something by mistake. So it's a web form. So we give it, we tell it exactly what we want in the web form. We have the default query. So we say, all right, before you show this metadata, just limit everything to motion pictures and videos. And then we can give it all of the other instructions for what that page is going to look like on this web form. So there's no programming required at all to set these things up. So we think this is really sort of the ultimate in being customizable for our users. So that's just a little bit of a taste of what our user interface looks like. I'm going to go back to my slides now and skip all the canned ones. Maybe this is a good point to see what kind of questions you have, because I've been going pretty quickly. Anybody have any questions for me at this point? Yeah.
The page building that you just showed, is that part of the functionality of Drupal as a content
We built
management
it,
system?
but it uses Drupal, but we built it on top of Drupal, so it's a Drupal module actually. Let's see. Right. Any other questions?
If a library doesn't have Drupal, it has to go with it?
If you use something else for your website, what you won't be able to do is pull in your website content into Drupal. So one of our goals for developing, well, a couple goals for developing it on top of Drupal. One is that Drupal has thousands of applications in a big community, so that if you want to add something to your XC front end, you don't have to build it from scratch. So our developer was able to find an image viewer just on Drupal and pull that in, and you could do tagging and all kinds of stuff that's already out there. So that was one advantage of doing Drupal. The other advantage is that if a library does use Drupal, they can put their website content right into XC so they get searched right alongside the metadata in the catalog. Because another thing we found in our user research is that users don't really understand that the website and the catalog are different. So they'll find a search box on the website and they'll start typing in, whatever they're trying to look for in the catalog, and they don't understand it's 2 different things. So we tried to make that easier by having everything integrated. So if you don't have Drupal as the basis for your website, you wouldn't be able to do that part of it unless you moved your website. Other questions? Okay, so now I'm going to spend a little time talking about metadata in the system, because I think this is what really sets what we're doing apart from just another discovery interface. We've really tried to do a lot of extensive stuff with the metadata. So again, you've seen the diagram before. Now I'm going to talk about this middle layer. We talked about the top part, now I'm going to talk about this middle layer. And this is what we call the Metadata Services Toolkit. And there are tools for automated processing of the metadata. So we really consider this as sort of a part of an ILS that never got included in an ILS. You need sort of a way to take big batches of data and clean them up and change them all at once. The other thing about this system is that we synchronize the data and enable you to synchronize the data from your ILS automatically into the front end. And the Metadata Services Toolkit enables you to do this. So, so you'll do an initial setup of the system. Excuse me. You pull all your data in, but then your cataloger goes in and changes the data tomorrow. So we need to pull that new record that the cataloger has updated, or the new thing got cataloged, or maybe something got deleted. We need to pull that data on a regular basis. So this enables you to synchronize really as often as you want. You could do it, once a day. You could do it more often than that if you wanted to, and it does it automatically. Okay, so what does this Metadata Services Toolkit do? Really the purpose of it is to get the metadata in shape to be used in the user interface. This is where you need to be able to have control over the metadata to have control over the user interface. This is where we provide that control over the metadata. So we can clean up or normalize things that are inconsistent. We can take metadata from different repositories and make it work together. It's not a metadata editor. You don't use it to go in and edit records one by one. This is really designed to put 1 million records through it at a time and have it all cleaned up and processed together. So the way we do this is that there are services that go with the MST. And there are different types of services. One will clean up the metadata. Oops. Sorry about that. Where we can clean up the metadata, we can transform it from one schema to another, we can make it work, aggregate metadata from different repositories, and we plan to do some authority control as well. So here, I showed you the back end where we were looking at eXtensible data, where it had a work record, an expression record, and a manifestation record. This is how we do it. We take a marked bibliographic record and we parse it into the right, into these 3 records. And then we take a mark holdings record, which is already linked in your ILS to it knows which bibliographic record it goes with, and then we move that to what we call an eXtensible holdings record. Now this is a little kludgy because there's nothing called holdings in Ferber, but there is in MARC, and we have all this data, and it needs to go somewhere. So this is where we had to do a little bit of a kludgy thing to make it work with the data that we have. And then we create links between those records, and I showed you that when we were looking at the eXtensible record. So this is a really extensive process to do all this in the background, to take the MARC data in and manipulate it and massage it so that it really works in a very, very different environment. So for the eXtensible schema, we're pulling data from a couple of different schemas, existing schemas. And this is something called the Dublin Core application profile. I don't know if you've learned about that a bit, but it enables you to take data from different schemas and use it together as long as the data in each schema meets certain qualifications. So we're using all the Dublin Core elements. We're using a subset of elements from RDA. And we also, in a few cases, had to make up our own elements to make the system work. These are just things that enable our particular functionality. And actually, that's one where we had to, the thesis advisor, that didn't appear in RDA, so we had to make that one up too. So we have this schema called the eXtensible, sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. So for RDA, we're using a subset of RDA. I mean, there are hundreds of data elements in RDA. So we pulled a subset that we really needed. And the things that we needed were things that were very, very specifically defined. So we didn't want to lose the kind of specificity that we find in MARC. So those are sort of the type of thing that we're using. So this eXtensible schema, well, we had to create our own schema because we really didn't find anything out there that works for us. We've really optimized it to do what we needed to do for XC. It's not something where anybody would ever take a metadata class and learn how to create an eXtensible schema record. So you don't have to worry about that. But it's really, it's designed to make the system work in the way we need it to work. And the thing that I think is, you know, for the future, the most valuable part is the way we're learning how to do those, to create those Ferber level records and manipulate them and make sure the links stay intact as new ones come in. This is where we're really setting the stage for implementing RDA, but in a non-MARC-based environment. So I'm going to just show you a few screenshots from the Metadata Services Toolkit. Let me talk a little bit first about, these are the sort of things that it does. It's a tool for metadata librarians. It's also a tool for the people in your library that are doing data loads and managing the data that comes in from different places. So what this does is it allows you to, this all sounds kind of fancy, these are all the tasks, but basically what we're having to do is you've got to get the metadata into the system. You've got to tell the system what to do with the metadata. And then you have to make sure it did it right. And then you have some administrative stuff. So those are sort of the categories of what we're trying to do with this system. So I'll show you a few screenshots of what it looks like, because we've designed a really nice user interface for it, and it's just for catalogers, just for metadata. So the first thing you have to do is you have to tell it what repository to get the data from. So it's very simple. You give it a name and you give it the URL for where you want to harvest the data. The system will automatically try to do a handshake with that repository and say, yes, it's out there, it's ready to be harvested, here's what you can get from it, and it will tell you that it worked. And it'll tell you what kind of formats metadata it'll give you. So that was the add repositories. Then you tell it how often you want to get the data. Schedule a harvest. So I want it every morning at 8 a.m. I want it to go out and look for new records. There's another one I didn't show you the screen here, but you want to add a new metadata service when it's you want to add a new crosswalk or a new way to clean up the data. You just there's a button there for doing that. Now, processing rules sounds really fancy. All it is basically telling the system, here's the data I have, and here's what I want you to do with it. So there's a couple screens. I'll just go through these quickly. This is the processing rule screen. So you tell it where to get the data. So I could say, get the data from my test repository here, and then you want to tell it what to do with it. So these are the options here. So we could send it through the normalization service or the transformation. So it's really like creating a path. Take the data from here and put it here. So, so that's telling the MST what to do with it. Okay, so it's done its work. How do you know it did it right? We have developed what I think is a very cool way to do that. It's a browse interface for metadata troubleshooting. So you can search the metadata. You also, over on the left-hand side, there are facets here. And I don't know if you can see what they are. Instead of being a facet for author or title or date, it's for where did the records come from? What happened to the records? Were there errors in the records? If you look down here, these are all the different kinds of errors that get found. And so if I want to clean up and figure out what went wrong, I can click on one of these errors, and then I can just go to those records and I can figure out what went wrong. It's really important because when you're doing, doing something to millions of records at a time, you want to make sure it didn't mess up, really. And there's an error message as we show it on the record itself. The way the troubleshooting works is that we keep the record before anything's done to it, and then we keep a record after it did whatever it did to it. So each record has like a predecessor and a successor record. So you can actually follow the same record through the system at different points in time and figure out, if something went wrong, where it went wrong. And you can also get to a full record display, and up at the top is administrative metadata, down at the bottom is the XML. So I'm just going to go through this real quick. Okay. So that's just sort of a piece of that. That gets to be, I think it gets to be kind of technical, but I think that's really where the power of our system is in being able to do that with our metadata behind the scenes. So what's next for XC? Well, one thing that we're looking at very carefully and hoping to work on is linked data. And I know some of you are working on linked data because I met with some linked data class this afternoon. And if you're not familiar with it, just to let you know that this is a way that we can make data in libraries work in the semantic web. So it's very important, I think it's very important, to get the metadata about library resources. It's in these closed systems that we have right now, and it's in our ILS, and if somebody knows to search our OPAC, they'll find it, but if they're just browsing in Google, that data may be totally hidden from them. So what we need to do is find a way to get that data out there in a way that web developers can make use of it. So the two things we need, we've got all this legacy data. In order to create linked data out of it, we need some software in order to transform it. And that's where XC has done most of the work to get us there. We have one more sort of piece at the end to do that. But then we also need, somebody has to go through and analyze all the data and make the connections between the legacy data and link it to linked data properties, which is really, it's an intellectual exercise. And there's some tricks to doing that. I think we're really, as a profession, we're sort of at the beginning of learning how to do that. But we've got the software, and we're really hoping that people will start to use it for this. So what the software can do is we can take the MARC values that we have and we can turn those into vocabularies. We can clean up the data we don't need, get rid of a lot of inconsistent data, and we can do a lot of the mapping of the MARC record into the Ferber entity records. It's not perfect, but we can get an awful lot of the data out. So that's the good news. The bad news is that a lot of the data is not really as useful as we might hope that it would be. Some of the data in the records is very hard to map, and it's hard to track the relationships sometimes between, there's a lot of stuff in a MARC bibliographic record, and it's not always logical why it's in there, and it's trying to get it out and make it fit with the Ferber model is really difficult. I did a paper on this, presented it at a conference last December, or last October. There's a link to it here, and I'll be making the slides available, so you'll be able to, if you want to take a look at that. And the whole paper is really about how hard it was, so you may or may not want to hear about the difficulties. So the good news is that we can get some of the way there, and there's a lot of potential there. The other thing that we've been able to do is to start looking at what best practices would be for libraries if they want to create new data. And, how do we start and how do we, get the profession going in this way? So there are a couple things that we need to do. We're creating identifiers for our records, and they have to be in the format that is, makes them persistent so that somebody can link to our records. The second part of this is what we're doing with the exe schema, using registered schemas. And then the third part is using registered vocabularies. And this is just sort of tip of the iceberg of what's really involved. And if you really want to hear more about that, you can look at that paper that I cited on the previous slide. And I think actually that the slides from that talk are available online as well. So what we've done for linked data, we've provided a platform where linked data could be implemented without too much trouble with it. And we're trying to get some funding to do that. We've made sure that our data can be converted to what's called RDF triples, which is sort of the basis for linked data. Try to make that as easy as possible. And we really hope that other people will build on what we've accomplished so far. So, and maybe the next version of the linked data class will use smart data that we've transformed and play with that in the mashups. So that's really our goal, to make something that other people will use. So that concludes my remarks, and I've left 5 minutes for some questions, and I would be very happy to take them. I know I went through a lot really quickly. Yeah?
You mentioned that right now you're focusing on your catalog data and digital collections and repositories. Do you have any plans, or are you working with any article harvesting, like a summon type service?
We had, we have originally intended to do that, and I think that the system is very capable of doing that. What we'd have to do is we would have to work with a provider that makes their content available as OAI harvestable, and there are some that already do. Oxford Journals Online does, and I think PubMed. So the data's out there, we could get it. We would have to develop another service for the MST to deal with whatever schema that is and get that data in. We haven't done that piece of it yet. So yes, this software can do that. I think when we started this project, we had sort of a dream that that's what people would use this system for, and that was before someone came onto the landscape. And actually, Serial Solutions has been a big supporter of this project. They've given us quite a bit of funding. And we were sort of puzzled when we came out with Summon. Well, we knew they were working on some big thing. Well, why do how do you see this fitting with this thing that you're developing? And what they really seek is our back-end software as a way for libraries to manipulate their data, clean it up so that that can be used in Summon, which is fine with us, really. And, when you look at the kind of work that they've done, and I should talk about other, they're not the only ones. EBSCO and Ex Libris and OCLC have similar products, and they've done all of the negotiating with all of these different companies, which is something that probably an average library is going to go out and do by themselves. If there's a library that has an environment where they only have maybe 2 or 3 data providers and they want to do it themselves, certainly our software could do it. That's sort of a long answer, so it's yes, but yeah, it can, but there's some limits on what we could do with it. And it's mostly just the negotiation. More questions? Yeah?
I'm just curious, you mentioned how this works really well with MARC, but have you guys thought about how it might implement with some of the more niche types of authority control, like the archives EAD records?
Yeah, our goal was to do the MARC data first because that's, to my mind, the most pressing issue for libraries as far as staying relevant and having something to go to in the future. The MST part of the system will work with any XML. It doesn't even have to be XML metadata, it would work with any XML data. So we try to build a system that would be usable by other communities who want to use it for EAD or whatever, and we are seeing some interest from other communities and people that have their own kind of separate collections of data. As long as it's in some kind of XML, they could build a service to do whatever they want with it. Now to get it into the XE schema, there would have to be some work, to try to get that, do the mappings and do the intellectual work to figure out how you would map EAD to MARC, to Ferber levels. So that's a little bit trickier. But our goal with XE really was to build the parts so that they could be used all together, as we're showing it here, but that the parts can also be used on their own or in various combinations. So a library might not want to use a front end for EAD, but they might want to use the back end.
Interest in the public library community to using?
We hope so. Where we are with the development right now is that the back end is done, the front end is almost done. So we haven't been able to advertise yet that the system is all done, it's ready to use. And I think that once we get to that point, we'll start to get more interest. We do have someone at Denver Public Library was playing with it. We've also had interest from other, where there have been developers at public libraries that are interested in playing around, we have gotten some interest there yet. But I think once the system is ready to be implemented, I think we'll probably get some more interest there yet. And then certainly the whole customization, they could customize to look exactly the way they want it to. So we hope that will be attractive for public libraries as well, sure.
Functionality plan for user-generated data, like tags or reviews or anything like that?
Absolutely, because that's something that Drupal does really well. There are modules in Drupal that enable you to do the tagging and stuff. So that was originally one of the things we set out to do originally. And we sort of put that off a little bit because we had some other, we realized some of the back-end stuff was really more difficult than we thought it would, but it was going to be. But that's something that we definitely want to do. And it wouldn't be that hard to do the user-generated metadata and have all that stuff stay in Drupal. But what we really want is to be able to pull that stuff back into the metadata services toolkit so we can process that as well, and it can become part of the metadata. So that becomes kind of a bigger deal to do that. So, but I think it would be pretty easy to do just incorporate it in the user interface part of it. Yeah.
Knowing what you know now, what would you tell an academic library to do with their OLS? With the front end, I'm sorry.
With the front end, wait 6 months till we're done. And then try out what we've got. I know a lot of libraries have implemented something in the meantime. There are other open source alternatives that they've been playing with. As far as the ILS is concerned, I think this is probably not a good time to migrate to a new ILS. There are a couple of open source options out there I think they're probably pretty good for smaller libraries, but I don't see the vendors with good alternatives for ILSs. So I think a lot of people want to sit tight with the ILS that they have. So we're, I think the thing that's most frustrating for me is that we're not quite done yet with the front end, that we can't say, here, take it. And it's like, we're almost there. We're just working on a few, some performance issues really to get, because again, the front end has to be able to process millions of records behind the scenes in order to populate it. So we want to make sure, that this is something that a library of any size can use and bring up and have it not, crash on the 20 millionth record. It needs to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Stable and able to handle that. So I'd say, yeah, just hold on a little longer and we'll be done. We can have our stuff. Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.